Hello, I'm Sean and welcome to Because Hobby. Today we're going to be using the Warhammer paints and tools set to paint an Imperial Fist. I recently had a conversation with a friend of mine and he said, oh, the paints and tools set's only for Necrons and Ultramarines. So I'm aiming to prove with a few new videos that you can paint a few different chapters of Space Marines with this set. So the colours we're going to be using are Avalanche Sunset, Mephiston Red, Abaddon Black, Corax White, Tesseract Glow, Lead Belcher, Runelord Brass, Runefang Steel, Retributorama, and the shade paint Agrax Earth Shade. So here's our Imperial Fist, all undercoated in Wraithbone. I used the Wraithbone spray can for this, but you could use the Wraithbone paint, a Corax White spray can, Grey Seer if you'd like to, or any other light coloured undercoat. We're going to begin by base coating with Avalanche Sunset now. As always, give it a good shake, and be careful when you open it. We're just going to take a bit of that yellow and put it on the palette. Make sure you rinse your brush afterwards, because yellow, I find it needs a little more thinning if you've got more of it. You want a nice even coat, so you want your paint to be correctly thinned. Give it a little mix around on your palette, looking for that same milky consistency we talked about in previous videos. And once you're happy with that, you can test the coverage on your nail if you'd like to, and we can start base coating the Space Marine. You're just going to coat the whole Space Marine in Avalanche Sunset. It may take you 2 or 3 coats. I believe this one took me 3 coats. Just make sure, take your time, get a nice even coverage on the model, let it fully dry, have a look, see if you can still see your undercoat through it. If you can, you definitely need another coat. If you can't, you might be alright. Just make sure it's not just 1 coat, at least 2 is optimal. As I said though, I used 3, you may need more if you thinned a little bit more, but that's nothing to worry about. Imperial Fists are my favourite chapter, so I thought I'd go for these guys first. I don't usually personally paint them in Avalanche Sunset because I dislike the mustardy tone, but I do actually quite like the way this model's turned out. So I'll finish up off camera and I'll bring you back when he's fully coated yellow. So here he is with his full coat of yellow. As you can see, it's a nice flat even coat. But now we're going to move on to painting the areas we want Abaddon Black. As ever, give it a good shake. And we're going to be doing the weapon, the holsters, all the little vent bits on the power pack, the little vent bits on his helmet, and anywhere else we want black, such as the joints in the armour. You don't have to paint all these areas black if you don't want to. You can paint them whatever colour you want if you like. I just think black looks best, especially for those areas you want to paint with a metallic paint afterwards. So as I always say, just get it on your palette, thin down the paint as you would. Making sure that's nicely mixed up. And then just start coating the areas you want black. We're going to start with the weapon here. Over a white undercoat, black does tend to need 2 coats because it's slightly thin and you can see the white through it, doesn't look very good. So just make sure, as I said, you just let it dry, take a look and go from there. Just be careful to take it slow around the grip of his bolt gun. Just make sure to take your time, try to be as neat as possible. If you do make a mistake, I know I definitely did in this one, just know that you can go over it with the yellow. It's a little bit more difficult to cover black with yellow, but you can get it done, it is possible. So I'll bring you back when all the black bits are finished. Okay, so now here he is with all the black parts done. As you can see, I made sure I got all the areas that needed it, especially the creases in the legs. That's an important part, a lot of people miss that. But now we're going to move on to the areas we want with Fist and Red. As always, just take that on your palette. You don't need too much for this part. We're only doing the eagle on his chest and the trim of his shoulder pads. Just get that nicely thinned down. As I always do, just test the coverage on the back of your nail if you want to. And I'm removing some excess on a tissue instead of my hand this time. So just go straight in on the chest eagle. Just be careful to try and keep within the boundaries of the insignia. Don't worry too much if you do go outside of them, because it's red. You can cover red, no problem, with a bit of yellow. But just make sure you're getting a nice even coverage across that. Just taking your time. As you can see, I'm working for the middle outwards to either left or right. This is quite a good way of doing it because you can kind of follow the wings. That's quite a useful technique, I find quite useful, just following the feathers along to the final one with the tip of my brush. Now I'll finish up and bring you back when the shoulder pads are done. Great, so we've got all the red parts done, the shoulder pads are done and the eagle's done. As you can see, I've just outlined the shoulder pads as I do on all the models, and I've just been careful with that chest eagle there. Now we're going to move on to Tesseract Glow, and we're going to use that to paint the eyes. Give this one a very good shake. It's a technical paint. It can build up sediment at the bottom if you've left it for a while, so just make sure you give it a very good shake. You need all those particles mixed in. It's very watery, so you don't need to thin it, but my advice would be to get more on your brush than you need and then wick it off with a tissue. Just lie the model down on your desk so he's nice and stable, and bring the brush to the eye from the back of the helmet. That should help you fill it. The Tesseract Glow itself, it should have no problem. Absolutely no problem at all, just filling the recessed area. So just sort of bring it to it and let it flow into the area, almost like capillary action. You may need to do it 2 or 3 times, but I'll bring you back when I'm done. Okay, so a bit of learning from experience here. I haven't used Tesseract Glow too much. Tesseract Glow, it just wasn't covering very well over the yellow. You weren't seeing a lot of the green. I'm not sure if that was because of the yellow or whatever. But in this case, I've decided to come in with Corex White and just put a little bit in the eye lenses. And what we'll do is we'll let that dry, and then we'll go over it with Tesseract Glow again. And it should give a much brighter green glow, and it should be more distinct than it was over yellow. So I'm just going to thin down my white as before. And we're going to use the same technique to paint those eyes again. Once you've done this, just return with the Tesseract Glow and do the same thing as I showed you, and it should look a lot better. Okay, so with that little problem with the eyes sorted out, we're going to move on to the metallics now. We're going to use Lead Belcher. Like I always say with metallics, make sure you give it a very, very good shake and don't let your brush get away from you. We're going to need quite a bit of Lead Belcher, so just make sure you've got a nice amount on your palette, obviously correctly thinned. Just wait for me to catch up thinning down my paint. And just come in on all the metallic areas of the bolt weapon. You can see this on the box art or on my thumbnail. It's the barrel, the grip, the rear of the weapon. I don't know what that's called. It's not a stock as such, but the rear of the weapon. The vents on the power pack, and the little breathing tubes on the helmet. Just get all those areas with a nice coat of Lead Belcher. You may only need one for Lead Belcher, you may need two. Just as I say, let it dry and we'll let it move on. One thing I did notice is there's a little clip on the sling of his bolt weapon. You can just paint that with the tip of your brush, just be careful, but you can always go back over it with black because we're going to be leaving the sling black. Yeah, just getting all those metallic areas that I told you about, and I'll bring you back when that's done. So first and foremost, my apologies. I seem to have lost the footage in which I used Runelord Brass. I only used Runelord Brass for the insignia on the bolt gun and the shells within the magazine of the bolt gun. Obviously they'll be coated later in Retributorama over the top, but right now you'll see in this clip that they are coated in Runelord Brass, so that's the colour you need to use for those two. But from there we're going to move on to Agrax Earthshade. We're going to use that as a wash on some parts of the model and to panel line all of the yellow armour. But we're going to wash the entire bolt gun in it. So make sure, as ever with shade paints, you give them a good shake. And just get a bit on your brush and just lie them down and just run the brush along any cracks or creases in the armor, anything that you would think would be filled with shadow. Just fill that area with a nice amount of Agrax Earthshade. You don't want it spilling out into other areas, but you just want it filling those areas quite nicely. You can see me following the lines of the model here. This is how you need to be doing it. Unfortunately, I'm not able to give you a zoomed view. That's something I'm going to be looking into in the future, so you're able to view what I'm doing much closer, which I think would be helpful for everyone. But yes, just gently going around all those areas and filling them. Making sure you're coating all the parts of that weapon with a little bit of Agrax Earthshade. You don't want a lot, but just enough. Just enough to give a light coat. So I'll finish off shading and I'll bring you back. So with the shading done, now it's time to highlight. We're going to be highlighting the yellow armour, and we're going to need Avalanche Sunset and Corax White to do that, and we're going to be catching all the hard edges of the model that you want to highlight. So just take some of your Avalanche Sunset, pop that on your palette, ideally next to the original colour on your palette so you can see the difference in shade. And then you'll be taking your Corax White. I would say the same amount of Corax White to the amount of Avalanche Sunset that you've used. You want to mix those in a 1-to-1 ratio. You can see me mixing it on the palette. Bring it in for you for a closer look. As you can see, it's much brighter, and that's what you're looking for, just a much brighter colour than what you've used on the model. This can always be achieved if you use the original colour and mix it with some white. So we're just going to get some of the paint we've mixed on our brush. And we're just going to start running it along the hard edges of the armour, just catching the very edge. And we're just going to do that all over the model. As I said in the previous Ultramarines video, I don't go for the heavy metal, aggressive edge highlighting where every single surface seems to have to be edge highlighted. I just go for sort of more of a understated edge highlight. We're not catching absolutely everything, but it is there. I'm of the personal opinion that a recessed shade will always look better than overdoing an edge highlight. And I'll bring you back when I've finished up. So with the edge highlighting of the yellow done, we're going to move on to edge highlighting the red. There's not a lot of that to do, but we're going to use Mephiston Red and Corax White. And we're just going to mix those in the same way we mix the Avalanche Sunset and Corax White. Again, leaving it next to the original colour for a bit of comparison. You don't need an awful lot of this. After all, we're only edge highlighting the shoulder pads and the eagle. Just that 1-to-1 mix again, as always. Make sure it is well mixed, though you don't want to have a streak of white in the middle of it. Of course, clean your brush when you're done, that's quite important. You want the right amount of paint for what you need to be doing on your brush at all times. So we're going to go with the eagle first, and we're just going to pick out the raised details on the eagle. We're going to leave the recesses nice and dark. Just going to pick out all those raised details, and then we're going to move on to the shoulder pad trim, and we're going to use the same technique for the shoulder pad trim that we did with the armour, just catching those raised edges, leaving everything else behind. You want a nice thin line. I'll show you how I do it now. You just want them in the best position possible, and you just run it like I'm doing now. Just run the brush back and forward until you can see it all along that edge. I'm holding it in an awkward position right now to try and show you guys. But just do that around the whole model, and I'll bring you back when I'm finished. Okay, so with that done, it's time to move on to the Retributorama. As mentioned previously, I did already coat the areas I'm doing now with Runelord Brass. Make sure you give it a good old shake because it's a metallic paint. And then just get a little bit, you won't need much for this step, on your palette. I'm not even bothering to thin it down because we're using so little. And you're just picking out the raised areas of those shells in his magazine and the raised areas on the insignia. Obviously you can see both sides of the magazine, so you want to catch both sides of those with the gold. And then just painting the insignia in the same way you painted the eagle on his chest. So with that little bit of gold out of the way, we're going to move on to highlighting the metal. I'm going to be using Runefang steel for that. Going to give it a good shake as always. Then getting a little bit again, you really don't need much, just on your palette. Again, I'm not going to be thinning this down because I'm using so little of it. You're just picking out the raised areas on all the metallic parts of the weapon and anywhere else, such as the vents, the edges of the vents on the backpack. They can look very nice when edge highlighted. So as you can see, just all the higher areas, you're just layering up that Runefang steel. That's the clip I mentioned for the sling. And you can see me there just catching the edges of those vents. It really doesn't take much, just a little bit. And it just looks that much more realistic. I'll bring you back when I'm finished. So with the highlights of the metallics done, we're going to move on to highlighting the black now. We're going to do this with a Baden black and Corax white. Again, it's that same 1:1 ratio I've been telling you guys about. You're just looking for a sort of darkish grey. Especially with white and black, it's very important to make sure it's very well mixed on the palette. You can get some sort of chunks of one of the colours in there and it can really ruin it when you're trying to edge highlight and it becomes pure white or pure black. Make sure it's well mixed, then clean your brush. And just pick up just a little bit on your brush, you don't need much. Pull off the excess if you need to. And again, as ever, you're just running your brush along those edges. Just catching those edges until you've got a nice fine line of grey. Don't feel the need to overachieve here if you don't want to. Just highlight the parts you feel would look good. That's what I always do. I'd say perhaps the most irritating part for me was the sling. I had some issues getting that to look straight. I had to clean up with black afterwards. That was rather annoying. But just take your time and I'll bring you back when I'm done. With that, he's pretty much done. Obviously I've got him on a 40mm base here. That was just for preference while painting because I prepared a base for him separately. You can coat it with Astro Granite and he'll be good to go. Just thought I'd give you a little look at his base. This is a base I made out of foam board. I just cut it down and coated it with Astro Granite. But with that, that's it. Up on screen right now there should be a list of the paints I used, and in the description you should be able to find any of the products I used in this video. If there's anything else you're interested in, please let me know in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, or a dislike if you didn't, and tell me why you didn't like it in the comments. I'd love to hear from any feedback. We're really trying to improve with every video. It's not easy. It's a real learning curve for myself and Polly. It's something we've been passionate about for quite some time and wanted to show everyone. Sort of put our take on painting Warhammer out into the world and just see if anyone enjoys it. I'd love to hear from you guys. The next video I've got coming out is going to be another one painting Space Marines, but I do have some things in the work for painting things from Warhammer 40k, some more things from Age of Sigmar. There's a lot of exciting releases coming out that I'm looking forward to. Hopefully going to get our hands on Piety and Pain when that drops, and if there's anything else you'd like to see, please let me know, because I'd be more than happy to buy it, take you through it, show you how to paint it, or even just an unboxing. If someone would like to see that, just let me know. I'm happy to move outside of just painting videos. I may do that in the future. I know that's something Polly's very interested in, is sort of having a roundtable discussion between me and her. I think that would be something that we'd enjoy making. If it's something you'd enjoy seeing, please let us know. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll catch you in the next video.